Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Talking about UFOs one more time. You gotta leave it to the folks at the Weather Channel to say things that make my brain itch. One of them said it makes their accuracy more accurate. I make mistakes all the time, but I don't get paid a whole bunch of money for speaking. Today's show is being brought to you by the Organic Man Coffee Trike, the best coffee on the planet. 4501 McPherson. If you're not in Laredo, you can always buy your coffee at organicmancoffeetrike.shop. And now for the show. I do want to thank all of my listeners who have been sending in photos. It gives me an idea who might be listening. Faces instead of blank spaces. I'm not going to put the images up on my page. They're just for me, so I know who's out there. Otherwise, I get these weird images in my brain on a bunch of mannequins or something, maybe space aliens all sitting around listening, and well, that's a little disturbing. So thanks for sending your photos, even the ones that it's nature shots, pictures of things around their home. At least it lets me know people are out there listening, not just a bunch of numbers generated by some computer. That's really weird how some people will do that. They actually pay to get more numbers for their listeners. So they're not really listeners, they're just numbers on a page, which that's kind of like if you went to the bank and your bank balance said you had $1,000 in the bank, but when you actually try to draw out money, you've only got $200. Oh, what does it make any sense to say you have 1,000 when you don't? Eh, what do I know about people? Chinese spy balloons have been in the news a lot here the last couple of weeks. Uh, it's really incredible. Instead of calling them spy balloons, they tried calling them weather balloons. Do those people really expect us to believe any of that nowadays? But there have been a lot of other UFOs in the news, and there have been a few inconsistencies when it comes to those spy weather balloons. If, and this is just my idea, if I was going to fly around in the sky to shoot down a balloon, I wouldn't use a missile that costs thousands of dollars. I would just spray the thing with a bunch of bullets. The government buys bullets by the boxcar load. Balloons aren't all that sturdy. Last time I looked, they're not bulletproof. You just hit them with a few dozen rounds and they'll settle to the ground as the helium leaks out. Then you can recover the remains. Hit the thing with a missile and blow it into tiny little bits. It will be a lot harder to recover all the parts. You'd be able to tell people, oh, we're sorry, we couldn't identify this horrible mess because all the components were burnt or blown up or something. Oh well, that's how they do things. The same government that wasted thousands of dollars shooting down a spy balloon announced that they're taking down some of the radar balloons being used to protect the southern border. Like, we don't have enough problems down here along the border with people sneaking in and smuggling in drugs and dangerous substances. They said they were doing this to save money. I don't use the term UAP. It's only there to confuse people. If you go to Japan, France, Russia, South America, you can find a UFO organization even when you don't speak the language. I've seen signs written in all language of the world with just those three letters, UFO. The folks hauling out UAP are still trying to avoid saying UFOs are real. No aliens here, just a bunch of weather balloons and foreign technology. Just how foreign, as in from some other star system, maybe? President Kennedy told NASA and the CIA to share all their UFO files with the Soviets on November 12th, 1963. I'm not saying that NASA had the president killed so they wouldn't have to show the Soviets what all we had, but it did look a little suspicious. President Trump ordered the Pentagon to release all of its information on UFOs, which is now being called UAPs, to muddy the water and make us believe that UFOs don't exist, but UAPs do. The Pentagon was ordered to brief Congress on what they knew about UFOs. The president is the top military official. He is the general's general, like him or not. Anyone in the military not obeying his orders, as long as they are not illegal, immoral, or unjust, is guilty of violating Article 90 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which outlines the crime of willfully disobeying a military member orders from a superior commanding officer. Career military folks who tend to ignore what those elected officials tell them were in a bind. You have congressmen and senators and even presidents who come and go on a regular basis. Well, some of them stick around forever, but they're considered temporary by the experts, the guys that are career military or the military industrial complex, and they think that they know far better than any elected official. So they tend to ignore what our representatives tell them to do. The original United States government was of the people and for the people. Nowadays, the elites want to own everything, and career military believe they know far better than we, the people. They drugged their feet and they did everything they could to not obey this order. Their thinking was wait for the next administration and see if the new guy would rescind the order. Surprisingly, he didn't. When I was in Edinburgh in 2021 UFO conference, a lot of people were asking what I thought was going to come of all this. Soon to be released report. I told everybody the military was probably going to give us a bunch of indecipherable doublespeak and not actually tell us anything we didn't already know. Most of the other speakers and vendors said pretty much the same thing. Don't hold your breath, you're not going to learn anything. When at long last the report came out on a Friday, no less, anytime the government wants to lessen the amount of attention paid to anything, they release the report on a Friday, hoping the weekend will hold something bigger and people will forget what was said late Friday afternoon. The report had a lot to say about what the Pentagon was going to say someday, but there was very little in the way of actual information. They told us what they were going to do someday, hoping a new and world shaking event would overshadow the next report. Something big like, oh, I don't know, maybe a war breaking out in Eastern Europe or something. I can just imagine what it looked like in Congress when the military stepped up to the podium. Everyone, look at this bright, shiny object in my hand, which was followed by a flash, and everyone being told they didn't need to know anything. That's just my imagination. The Pentagon was also ordered to release a follow up report the following year. Buried in the report, it said there were 144 UFO sightings, that only one could be explained. The folks doing the research that went into the report were about as sloppy as any government agency. Later, it was discovered there were an additional 400 reports filed by credible witnesses that somehow got overlooked. I wonder why the guys in charge weren't handed their pink slips and shown the door. If I was a soldier, well, back when I was a soldier, And I'd called in to tell my captain there were 144 enemy tanks coming our way. When the tanks came over the horizon, there were actually 514 of them. Don't you think I would get in just a little trouble? You know, like KP duty for the rest of my career? The count must have been done by the same folks who did the census. Remember that mess? Somebody can't count. The higher up in the government you are, the less likely you are to ever get in serious trouble. You'd think it'd be just the opposite. The bigger your responsibilities that you have, shouldn't the bigger the consequences for screwing them up be? The Air Force just kept saying, "Oh, there's nothing to see here. All those objects people are reporting are just weather balloons." There was to be a follow up report in 2022. The 2022 Annual Report of Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, UFOs, was published by the Pentagon's Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and surprisingly, it came out on a Thursday after a month long delay. The report was mandated by the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act and was created by the National Intelligence Management for Aviation and the newly established All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. Sounds like a retirement organization. I got a letter from the AARO. Oops. Some of y'all recognize that song. Input was gathered from various intelligence community agencies and military intelligence officers, the Federal Aviation Administration, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Department of Energy, and NASA, better known as Never a Straight Answer. In all, the report covered 510 UFO reports gathered from agencies involved in the reports and the branches of the U.S. military. The document noted that the majority of these were gathered from U.S. Navy and Air Force personnel who reported them through official channels. At long last, when they see a UFO, they can actually write a report and not wind up driving a desk. Ultimately, the report concluded that while UFOs continue to represent a hazard to flight safety and pose a possible adversary collection threat, whatever that is, many of the reports lack enough detailed data to enable attribution of the UFOs with high certainty. In other words, they were still unidentified. A lot of these reports were sighted over or near government facilities. Well, yeah, that's where all the radar and the security is. You don't have a whole lot of people watching the sky over a field out in West Texas. All the security is around the bases. Uh, the report began to put doubt on the witnesses, saying they didn't really know what they were seeing. A lot of the UFOs were actually balloons. The guys flying multi-million-dollar jets can't be sure what they're looking at. Makes you real comfortable when you watch a couple of jet fighters go flying overhead and you find, well, the folks in charge are saying, yeah, but they're both nearsighted. Think about this. An alien civilization wants to fly around over our planet. What would be a really good disguise? There have been a lot of sightings where the UFO would change shape as the witnesses were watching. It would go from a saucer shape to a balloon shape. Sometimes they look like clouds as well. And the 2023 report said within the new batch of sightings, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on 171 cases. It was a slow UFO year. including some in which objects appeared to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities, and they required further analysis. What they consider unusual flight capability is when the UFO makes a 90-degree turn without slowing down. Any pilot inside the craft would be splattered all over the side of the cockpit, but they don't want to say that these things have alien technology. Not out loud, anyway, not to us. Since 2022, there have been nearly 1,000 reports submitted by military personnel, the folks who should know the difference between a balloon and a spacecraft, and they are being looked into. Of these, about 500 are still very much unexplained, and the others are possibly explained. The government is desperate to explain the unexplainable as being pilot error or such, so they can pretend that UFOs still don't exist. Think about what this might mean. Let's just say, what was that the old lady used to always say? Picture this, Sicily, 1935. No. Did you know that she was actually the youngest one of the cast? Let's just say back in December 1942, a pilot was out flying over the Pacific Ocean, and he called in to say there were some unidentified objects flying towards Hawaii. And then the guy in charge comes out and he said, "Oh, don't worry, those are just a bunch of balloons." Today, there are about 500 reported sightings of things in the sky over the U.S. that nobody knows what they are. But the folks who swore they would take care of our country are ignoring them. Those 500 reports that's just what the military has seen. To add to this mess, there is still no government agency where you and I can turn in a report. If a flying saucer were to slowly fly over my house, I can pick up the phone and call the folks responsible for security and tell them, but they don't want to hear it. They don't have a published 1-800 number. The only places I can call, one of which is the National UFO Reporting Center, a privately run organization. The folks at Newfork have been doing the Air Force's job since 1969. The official UFO agency in Washington has about 1,000 sightings that they're looking into. Newfork has 170,000 reports that have been filed since '69. The Air Force simply ignores all of those sightings. That is a lot of weather balloons. Even though the Air Force is trying to sweep everything under the rug, there are still a few people out there telling us things we really should sit up and take notice of. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of the Pentagon's AARO, wrote in a research report co authored with Abraham Loeb, chairman of Harvard University's astronomy department. The report said an artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth, an operational construct not too dissimilar from a NASA mission, a mothership, if you will. Kirkpatrick was appointed as the director of the AARO when it was founded in 2022. Previously, he had served as the chief scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency Missile and Space Intelligence Center. Why do they have to have such long titles? The AARO was established to investigate unidentified objects, UFOs, of interest around military installations. Once again, the AARO does not want to hear from us. This is just for the military. Loeb gained notoriety when he proposed our solar system had been traversed by its first extraterrestrial visitor, October 2017. At that time, the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii had detected an object moving at a speed that caused scientists to suggest that it originated outside of our system. The object's orbit also hinted at other forces besides the sun's gravitational pull influencing its movement. Scientists dubbed this object Oumuamua, the Hawaiian term for scout, which Kirkpatrick and Loeb offer in their research paper as an example of a possible mothership with probe capabilities. Since Oumuamua was outside our atmosphere, the Air Force wasn't interested. Kind of how the Navy wasn't interested in those Japanese aircraft carriers off the coast of Hawaii in 1942. With proper design, these tiny probes could reach the Earth or other solar system planets for exploration, as the parent craft passes by within a fraction of the Earth Sun separation, just like Oumuamua did. Astronomers would not be able to notice the spray of mini probes because they do not reflect enough sunlight for existing survey telescopes to notice. The research paper, titled Physical Constraints on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, comes following a month of intense scrutiny of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and stirring trend ignited when a Chinese spy balloon captivated the nation by drifting across U.S. airspace. Well, there was more than one. I believe there were five spy balloons. The folks running things said the AARO provides the opportunity to integrate and resolve threats and hazards to the U.S. while also offering increased transparency to the American people and reducing the stigma, the lawmakers' letter stated. AARO success will depend on robust funding from its activities and cooperation between the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one either. That's why they blew up Chinese weather balloons. Transparency. February 16th, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida and 13 other senators sent a letter to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, and Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Stacy Dixon, calling for full funding for the AARO. The current administration's previous funding request for the fiscal year of 2023 had failed to fund anything beyond the office's basic operational expenses. The lawmakers argued. They opened the office, they put some furniture in there, and then they didn't bother to pay for anyone to do anything. This way they could say, look, we put together an office and it's looking into UFOs. This tells me the government isn't really trying to find out anything about these objects. It's kind of like Project Blue Book. Back when that thing was started, the investigators could go anywhere and ask Air Force Base commanders for reports. But the commanders were under no obligation to give them anything. Any pilots wishing to talk would quickly find themselves being transferred and assigned to a desk somewhere like Anchorage, Alaska. While our fearless leaders were busy not answering questions about UFOs, a bunch of people all began reporting UFO sightings. Since there was no way for citizens to contact the Air Force to report these sightings, they all wound up going to Newfork. It wasn't until sometime around February 8th the folks in Washington were told there were some suspicious looking objects that were unidentified and flying. The Defense Intelligence Agency report wasn't marked as being anything to get excited about, so it mostly went unnoticed. As the object was traveling over Alaska and a lot of folks were seeing it, the folks in Washington began to wonder if this just might be a cause for alarm. The people who did bother to read the report all shoved it into their outbasket with no one bothering to send it up the chain of command, saying, "There's an unknown object flying over Alaska." Hawaii, 1942, there's some unidentified planes flying over Pearl Harbor. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but it's a good idea to be prepared just in case. It was either a busy day with lots of other more important things to look into, such as whether or not we should send a few $1 billion to Europe, or maybe there was a game on. Why take a suspicious looking object seriously? Do you know about the Fugu balloons? Fugu, wind ship weapon. A project was a World War II era plan by the Japanese military to attack mainland United States with explosives and biological weapons. The unmanned hydrogen balloons would carry their payload across the Pacific Ocean. And then, once they were over the mainland United States, they would release their cargo of deadly bombs and bugs. Uh, the Fugu balloons were launched up until 1945, and nearly 300 of them actually landed in the United States. Well, they made it over the United States, but they only caused a few facilities, a few fatalities. I believe 6 people were killed by one of the bombs. They found it out in the woods. They didn't know what it was. They poked it with a stick and it blew them up. There was a complete media blackout because the U.S. didn't want the Japanese to know that their balloons were actually making it over here. The records of how many balloons were actually launched is a bit shaky. They say 9,300 balloons were launched. 300 of these balloons are known to have made it to the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Well, that leaves 9,000 missing balloon bombs out there. Some loaded with biological weapons developed at Unit 731 in China. That is a whole nother story. I could do an entire show on Unit 731, but it might get me kicked off of most platforms because it's a very nasty story. It makes Auschwitz look a lot better than it was. There is little chance any are still flying. They were made out of rice paper and potato starch, the balloon themselves. However, the explosive devices themselves can still be highly dangerous. They're still finding bombs from World War II that are having to be exploded because they can't be moved. Just think about what could be crawling around inside one of those biological weapons containers. That sounded bad. Biological weapons containers. There are a lot of people mad at the United States. Gee, I wonder why. Anyone reading about the Fugu balloon bombs would have to see that this is a very real means of attacking our country. Any suspicious looking object flying over our country should be examined closely by the folks who swore an oath to protect our country. I guess they have better things to do. What caught my eye as I was looking into anything about spy balloons was an article from February 5th, 3 days before the report was sent to Washington. A bunch of sailors from the Explosives Ordnance Disposal Group were seen pulling a balloon from the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The article said the sailors were recovering a high altitude spy balloon, and this made the news with pictures and everything. Somebody in Washington must read news articles from around the country. I mean, it's their job to see what's going on in the country. It wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if a spy balloon was off the coast of the United States and there was an unknown object drifting over the coast of Alaska, there could be some kind of a connection. Digging deeper, I found out the spy balloon had crossed into Alaska's airspace on January 28th, 8 days before the folks in Washington were told about it. The authorities decided to watch and wait before doing anything. The balloon drifted along as it meandered towards the continental United States. A drone could have flown up and gotten a closer look. Heck, some redneck with a high powered rifle could have gotten a closer look. Somebody with a telescope, a pair of binoculars. I guess instead they decided to just sit back and see where the balloon went. Their idea of keeping an eye on things was to wait and see if any of us citizens noticed the thing, I guess. Could this lackluster approach to national security come from the guys in charge already knowing the balloon was there and what it was doing? I keep hearing how some of our elected officials are closer to the Chinese government than they are to us taxpayers. Maybe the other guys pay better than we do. Once people began asking questions, somebody in higher office decided to launch a missile and blow up the balloon. Senator Marco Rubio once more didn't hold back. He said our government knew a Chinese military spy balloon was going to enter the airspace over the continental U.S. at least 2 days before it happened, yet they failed to act to stop it. The commander in chief of the armed forces must disclose to the Americans when they knew the spy balloon was heading towards the U.S. and explain why they didn't try to stop it. I guess Marco Rubio does not much care for our president. Still no word from the White House. During a closed door briefing, Senate staff repeatedly pressed military officials about who knew what and when they knew it. Sounds like the Watergate trials. When did the president know and when did he forget it? Well, something like that. If any of y'all don't know about Watergate, well, there's another show I should do someday. There's a lot more to it than just a bunch of guys breaking into the Democrats' office. A lot more to it. Senator Rubio and Senator Roger Wicker, who are on the Senate Armed Services Committee, sent a letter to top defense and intelligence officials raising questions about the administration's decision making after the balloon crossed into Alaskan airspace. U.S. officials tracked the balloon's trajectory and they recognized it as a part of a known aerial surveillance operation run by the Chinese military that they had flown dozens of missions worldwide, including half a dozen near or within the United States. Now, this is our military saying, well, we knew they were spying on us, but we didn't think we should do anything about it. Okay. What happened to not violating our airspace? I guess the idea is that it's just a low flying satellite, something like that. Since we don't touch their satellites and they don't touch our satellites, I guess a high flying balloon could be considered a low flying satellite. Maybe that's the way they think of it. January 28th, when the balloon entered U.S. airspace near Alaska, it entered near, well, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, known as NORAD, sent up fighter jets to make a positive identification, according to the officials. Still, officials only tracked the balloon and they saw little reason to be alarmed. Oh, yeah, they're just spying on us. Don't worry about it. At the time, according to U.S. officials, the balloon was expected to sail over Alaska and continue in a northern trajectory that intelligence and military officials could track and study. Instead, shortly after the balloon crossed over land, it turned and headed south. Now, balloons don't normally do this. We're talking about a balloon. Balloons follow the air currents. I tried looking up air currents moving out of Alaska. They all flowed into Canada. They're all going east. The balloon turned and moved on a southeasterly course. I was beginning to think just maybe The whole spy balloon story was just that, a story. Maybe it really wasn't a spy or weather balloon. Maybe it was an alien craft. If it was a flying saucer, it had to be one of the slowest moving saucers ever reported. January 31st, the balloon had traveled south and out of Canadian airspace. Canada must have known it was there, but they did nothing as well. The balloon, I'm going to call it that since I don't know what else to call it. The balloon traveled along the upper part of the United States until it was immediately over a military base. Then it came to a stop. The wind is still blowing, but the balloon is not moving. Right then and there, somebody should have aimed in and taken a shot at the thing. They could have used a cannon. They could have used anti-aircraft something. They should have shot it down right then. I know a few guys who could have probably shot it down with their rifles. A friend of mine used to have a live fire range on his property. The target had to be 4 sheets of plywood nailed together so you could see it with the scope. He always hit dead center too. He was a good shot. Anyway, Mongo. We called him Mongo because he looked like Alec Karras from Blazing Saddles. Now, how do you get a balloon to hover in space over a military base? Researchers have figured out how to use a form of artificial intelligence to allow the balloon's onboard controller to predict wind speed and direction at various heights, and then use that information to raise and lower the balloon accordingly. AI is becoming way too intelligent. Now, think about the movie Terminator. How much control China exerted over the balloon's path remains a matter of debate. Although the balloon, there were more than one, but I'm just calling it a balloon, was equipped with propellers and a rudder that allowed it to turn like a sailboat, according to senior U.S. officials, it mostly just followed the jet stream. That's why it turned south. The excuse being handed out says as the information was being gathered and sent up the chain of command, it got held up at some point. Someone read the reports of spy balloons coming from China and decided it didn't need to go beyond their desk. Once again, why that person wasn't fired? They were probably promoted. A senior administration official describes the unknown objects as having an octagonal shape, and there were strings hanging from it with a no discernible payload. I've seen balloons in all sorts of shapes. Uh, the folks out in New Mexico, they build some crazy looking balloons, but would China build an 8-sided balloon? What happened to the electronic payload that was shown in all the other images of spy balloons? Once the UFO was on the ground, the folks in charge should have brought in a couple of news crews, the ones that we can actually believe, and shown them, as well as us, what this thing looked like. But instead, the object was taken away to some unknown location for further examination. I think they're hoping we'll forget all about spy balloons and they won't have to tell us. What is so funny about this is the folks doing these things all the time wonder why it is that we don't believe them anymore. How many times can they lie about something and expect us to keep believing them? Now, remember what Einstein said: insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. The scale of China's balloon surveillance could be more extensive than a handful of flights over the U.S. Intelligence agencies are now looking at reports from all over the country for the past several years. If they had an agency where you and I could call in and file a report, they wouldn't have to get their information from MoveFork. But that's where they're getting it from. The government is having to ask UFO groups for their input. Any UFO report where the object drifted slowly along, had a round shape, and reflected sunlight is now being looked at. The revelation this month that the Chinese were able to fly surveillance balloons into American airspace without the U.S. military detecting them over the years has raised questions about the intelligence failure, and it has prompted calls for investigating the country's air defense and radar systems. Did they fail to see these balloons? Did they see them and ignore them? Or did somebody tell them, pay no attention? 10 years ago, I might have believed our military were as surprised as I was about the spy balloons. Today, no matter what the government says, I have more questions than they have answers. They just keep telling us things that aren't necessarily true, and it gets to a point where they just they're unbelievable now. It wasn't only the US that had these UFOs. Japan reported seeing three objects that they think were balloons from China. Japan has a kind of a weird history when it comes to UFOs. Even though they have a long history of UFO sightings in the country, their government still acted as if UFOs were not a thing until recently. They just simply ignored the whole thing. Britain is also looking into reports from the past several years to see if any of them could be attributed to spy balloons. Australia said they haven't seen any spy balloons over their country. Chinese authorities said they spotted some suspicious looking balloons over their territory and they were going to shoot them down. This was over the Shandong province. Are they just trying to act like they're also seeing UFOs in the sky? Or did the spy balloon folks forget to notify the civil defense folks? When asked about their spy balloons, the Chinese government said, are you ready for this? The objects seen were all weather balloons. Roswell is still being used as the template. Say it's a weather balloon, and most people will believe you. A bunch of spy balloons made so much news, you might think all UFO sightings are just man made floating objects. The fast moving craft can't be explained away so simply. I checked on the FAA website on how to report a UFO sighting, and this is what they have on their site. It says persons wanting to report UFO unexplained phenomenon activity should contact a UFO unexplained phenomenon reporting data collection center, such as the National UFO Reporting Center, Newfork. Newfork has a hotline where you can call and give a verbal report, or you can fill out one of their online forms. Peter Davenport has been director of the National UFO Reporting Center since 1994. He has also served as the director of investigations for the Washington chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON. Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett said he believes we have recovered craft sometime in the past. He said that he thinks that a lot of these craft are being reverse engineered somewhere, maybe Area 51, but that the folks looking into things don't thoroughly understand what they're doing. The FBI and the U.S. Air Force raided multiple homes belonging to a man who runs a little lone blog about Area 51. The man, George Arnoux, said a swarm of federal agents in riot gear busted into his primary residence, handcuffed him, and then marched him outside to wait in the freezing cold while they rifled through his apartment and took pretty much every piece of electronic equipment he owned. So far, the government has been tight lipped about the raid, but officials did verify that it did happen. In a statement, Lieutenant Colonel Brian McGarry confirmed the raid, saying only, this is an open and ongoing law enforcement investigation between the Las Vegas FBI and the Air Force OSI. Since 1999, Arnaud has run Dreamland Resort, a website that covers activities in and around Area 51, the no longer secret but still secretive government facility located in Groom Lake, Nevada. Since Bob Lazar came forward saying the government has flying saucers and they are reverse engineering them, the base has been the site of hundreds of bizarre, unexplained sightings. How many are secret government projects and how many might be alien technology is unknown, and the government is not going to tell us. The Air Force tests and develops some of its most sensitive experimental new projects and aircraft out at the base. Our news site features pictures and writings about the Air Force's so called black projects, classified operations carried out behind the veil of government secrecy and national security. This could help explain why agents from the FBI and Air Force Office of Special Investigations stormed two Nevada residences belonging to our new, one in Las Vegas and the other in the small town of Rachel. For the few folks out there who don't know, Rachel, Nevada is a small town, population 48. It's about 100 miles from Area 51. The Little Ailey Inn, previously the Rachel Bar and Grill, is a small bar, restaurant, motel located in Rachel, which is along the extraterrestrial highway. The business has been run for about 20 years and it's frequented by visitors who are heading out to the outskirts of Area 51. It's one of the only places you have where you can stop and get something to eat. Oh, if you are going to drive from Las Vegas to Area 51, fill up your tank. There aren't any gas stations out there. At the time, our news said he was staying at his place in Rachel, while his girlfriend was staying at the one in Las Vegas. According to our new, the raids involved 15 to 20 agents in full riot gear who broke down the doors of both houses and caused further damage both homes besides just breaking the doors. Our new claimed that the agents confiscated his laptops, phones, backup drives, camera gear, and his drone. Despite all the chaos, the reason behind the raid remains unclear. Our news said, despite my repeated requests for an explanation, I was only told that the search was related to images posted on my Area 51 website. Let me just say something to any government agencies and people who just might be listening. I have absolutely no images of Area 51 or any secret military base. I've never been to any secret bases. I've never flown over or near any military bases, secret military bases. Uh, I avoid breaking the law because I don't want to go to jail. I've been in jail. Well, whenever we did a shakedown, I searched many a jail cell, and I didn't care for it. Prisoners do not make very good roommates. Some of the things we found while doing these shakedowns, I'm still wondering and worrying about. What has been seen cannot be unseen. Anyway, I don't have any secret documents. I don't have any photographs. If I did, well, I sure the heck wouldn't talk about it. But no, I don't have anything like that. So you don't have to kick down my door. Some of us, sorry about that. UFO hunter Matt Wells says the unusual number of sightings has led him to believe that any day now, alien visitors are going to announce their presence. Sometime in the year 2023, there will be something said or shown to us that will make everyone realize that we are not alone. Some of us already know this. The folks who still think all those lights in the sky are just weather balloons will probably think any kind of alien announcement is just CGI or a hologram. I know aliens are real. However, if on tonight on the 6 o'clock news there's something that looks like a gray or a reptilian or any of the other beings that are here on Earth, I'm still going to say it's not real. Aliens have been among us for thousands of years. I'm willing to bet a vast majority of them look just like us. Valiant Thor looked human. The aliens who visited George Van Tassel looked just like us. According to some researchers, there are 14 different alien species on our planet, but that most of these look human. There's also the question as to how long aliens have been on our planet. At what point in life do aliens living on our planet no longer qualify as being aliens? As years go by and new generations are born, do the beings from other star systems eventually qualify as being Earthlings, even if they don't look human? Well, look at the octopus. That thing don't look human, but it is an Earthling. Anyway, there are stories saying that the reptilians have lived here for thousands of years. When their long ago ancestors began to butt heads with humans, the reptilians decided to go underground. Literally. They moved into caves and tunnels that run beneath our feet. Back to Matt Wells. He went on to say, with all the sightings of spacecraft over historic locations that would draw attention to them, the aliens are showing everyone they are here. With the announcement from the Pentagon saying those things in the sky aren't ours, they aren't from Russia, and they're not Chinese, and we don't know who they are or where they come from, even some skeptics are beginning to change their mind about whether or not we are alone in the universe. Mr. Wells said, I believe we could see aliens coming to Earth for everyone to witness much sooner than originally thought. Abnormal activity has been recorded in the UK at Big Ben, Stonehenge, and Bonny Bridge in Scotland, a famous UFO hotspot. The fact that all of these are being seen and reported within days of each other than over some of the world's biggest sites, is huge. We're talking about large numbers of UFO hunter groups who have no affiliation to each other reporting the same thing. It is the most blatant display we have seen. Athos Salome recently said aliens would descend on Earth in 2023 via an underground portal located at Area 51 in the U.S. Athos Salome is a renowned parapsychologist and a gypsy from Brazil who predicted the Black Plague of 2020 back in 2012. He is well known for incorporating historical research into paranormal analysis activities. Athos has been compared to the well known seers such as Nostradamus and Baba Vanga. Athos said there is a tunnel below the ground level of Area 51 leading to a three-dimensional portal which is due to open in 2023. This portal would be able to transport people between space-time dimensions. There is a tunnel that leads to another place, and this access is what everybody is looking for so they can play God. If there is some portal about to open under Area 51, we will never know about it. The people will keep a lid on it and only tell us taxpayers to stop asking questions. As I was researching this show, I read a bunch of UFO reports. The first bunch were mostly from the US Canadian border, and they looked like more of those spy balloons. The size, the shape, the drifting description made me figure these were just balloons. Here are a few more reports that can't be explained away as being balloons. On the evening of January 3rd in Rostov region of Russia, a round object was seen in the sky moving over the village of Sultan Sai. It looked like a ball or maybe a balloon. The military opened fire and brought down an unknown object with anti-aircraft weapons. See, you don't have to use a missile that costs thousands of dollars. You can just fire a cannon at it. According to the report, the object was small-sized object in the shape of a ball, and it was spotted moving against the direction of the wind. Once the unknown thing had been shot down, the military rushed in, recovered all the bits and pieces. Nobody came out to say what they had shot down. They only said the citizens should remain calm and not worry. Governments should realize those of us who are supposed to be protecting would be a lot happier if we knew what they were actually shooting at. This secrecy, when it comes to just about everything, is getting a bit much. When they do tell us anything, it usually turns out to be a lie anyway. Stop dragging that weather balloon story around. I don't think anybody believes it anymore. January 10th, there was a daylight sighting of a saucer shaped object. It looked like a classic flying disc. The UFO circled the village several times over about a 30-minute time period. Just about everyone in the village was able to see the flying object as it passed over most of the buildings. It was never very close, but it was distinct and easy to see. Several people managed to get photographs of it. This was also in Russia, but I failed to write down the name of the village. But it was a saucer shaped object and it circled the village. I have listeners in the Netherlands and I don't speak the language, so I'm just going to wing it and see what happens. January 17th over Hoofddorp, Netherlands. Hoofddorp, Hoofddorp. Hoofddorp. A man was driving through the countryside when he saw a weird looking cloud. It caught his attention, so he kind of focused in on it for a few seconds. As he watched, he noticed this cloud wasn't moving along with all of the other clouds that were. It was just stationary in the sky and it was far darker than all of the others. As he watched, some kind of a line was lowered from the bottom of the cloud. It was long and thin. It looked like the cloud, the same substance, but it hung down below for several minutes and the witness was able to get a video of it. The tail was too thin to be natural formation. It was more like a piece of wire or a tail, and it just stayed visible. Even as the wind up there was blowing around, the tail wasn't moving. It wasn't slowly being pushed out of the way. As he watched, the cloud just hung there for some time, uh, and then it just simply moved away. What better disguise than to make your UFO look like a cloud? There are a lot of people who will lay on the ground and look up and assign names and faces to these wispy sky ships. When they do see something, the naysayers haul out the old pareidolia explanation. Pareidolia has been used to explain away just about everything not covered by the weather balloon. On the evening, January 18th, in Glasgow, Scotland, several residents reported seeing a ball shaped structure in the sky. One of the witnesses was adamant that this was no balloon. He was able to catch a few seconds of video and swore that he was looking at some kind of a UFO. The witness said this was the first time an unknown object was seen in the sky over Glasgow. This was not the first time. He said on occasion he'd seen an orb high in the sky that quickly morphed into looking somewhat like a jet. There have been hundreds of orb sightings all over the world, and a majority, the major problem is even photographs of these things only look like a round circle. Uh, Too easy to hoax something like that. The witness said he believed the purpose behind some of the sightings was for these alien creatures to show humanity that their technology is far superior to ours. January 18th in Plymouth, England, a businessman, Kevin Kelway, managed to capture an unknown object dancing in the night sky. The footage was captured at 6:40 a.m., and the witness said he had been living in the same location for well over 30 years, and there had never been anything like this in the sky before. At about 11 p.m., January 19th, in the southwest part of England, a witness was walking his dog. A short way from home, he spotted a bright white light in the sky. As he looked closer, he could make out what was a saucer shaped light, and there was no sound whatsoever. The witness watched the light for several minutes, but soon had to get back home. The light was still there when he did get back home, but once inside, he looked out the window, it was gone. 7 p.m., January 23rd, Justin Belenson filmed strange lights over Hollyhead Mountain from his bedroom window in Anglesey. His son was also watching the lights as the man recorded the lights on his video. The object looked to be about 3 miles away, and it was maybe 50 feet across. The lights all blinked out as if someone had thrown a switch. Bang, they were all gone. During the afternoon of January 24th in Palmdale, California, a mother and daughter witnessed a silver saucer shaped object. The mother said her and her daughter saw the saucer suddenly appear out of nowhere. It just blinked into being. The saucer was visible for about 10 minutes. As they watched the saucer, it just suddenly blinked out of sight. The sky had been silent. There was no sound of any motors, nothing. 30-year-old Shane Draper of Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire witnessed a bizarre object at 8 a.m. on January 27th as he was on his way to work. The witness pulled his car to the side of the road so he could get a better view of the UFO without running off of the road. At first, he thought the object was an airplane that was about to crash. He thought he saw flames coming from it. A Draper watched as the object made a sharp turn, way too sharp for an airplane, and then it was gone. On the evening of 31st, no, on the evening of January 31st in Yakima, Washington, that's the home of Bob Gimlin, the Patterson Gimlin film. But the witness was not Bob, it was somebody else. A resident managed to capture footage of several pulsating lights. The witness, still not Bob Gimlin, said the lights were in a strange pattern that changed color from red to white and were in close proximity to one another. The objects remained visible for several minutes. February 5th, Scottsdale, Arizona, a witness managed to capture 12 minutes of footage as a UFO flew overhead. The witness said he had seen several unknown objects in the sky days before and he wanted to capture them with his camera. The objects did not disappoint. They showed up and they stayed visible. The objects were described as bright and flickering as well as orb-like, and they produced flashes of color at random intervals. When he viewed the video later that evening, he noticed there was a second craft that at first appeared to be orb-like, but it would mutate into some kind of a metal craft as it was moving through the sky. The images don't look like any kind of a weather balloon from any country or anywhere. On the afternoon of February 8th, also in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, a local was riding his mountain bike when he noticed a diamond-shaped object in the sky overhead. With the object was visible, there were also a few airplanes that were crossing overhead in the background. He could hear the engines from the plane, but the diamond-shaped craft was silent. This area has been called a hot spot for some time now, especially after the Phoenix lights were seen. At around 5:30 February 8th, near the village of Hockley in Essex, in south of England, 22-year-old Daniela Danielle J was heading downtown for some shopping. Now in Britain, they call this going to the shops. Here we say you're going shopping. My listeners in Great Britain will know what I'm talking about. Let's face it, if we all spoke the same way, it would be real boring. Plus, it gives us a quick way to tell when somebody's not from the same country or the same area. Now, I'm from Texas, and no matter where I go, people say, "Hey, you're from Texas," especially because I wear a baseball cap that has the Texas flag on it. Danielle was walking. She saw the sunset was quite spectacular, and she decided to catch it on her camera. Once she got back home and was looking at her images, she spotted several green lights that were radiating from some unknown object. The unknown object was way too big to be a drone, and there was no sign at the time that she was looking up at the sky. Now, they do have computer drones that can fly in a formation, making just about any kind of an image you can imagine. But these drones make noise. It's a high pitched buzzing sound like a really big bee. There was no sound in the sky that day. In the evening of February 10th in Wilcox, Pennsylvania, at 6:30, a man had been working on a vehicle in a garage. As he was walking back to the building, he spotted some weird lights in the sky. It didn't look like a star or a planet. It was not a satellite either. He pulled his cell phone out to try to catch it on camera, but as he was aiming, the light vanished, as if it knew he had a camera. It just blinked out like somebody had thrown a switch. Thinking that that was quite odd, he was about to continue to the building when the light came back on. Now, this time he was able to catch a short video of it, uh, about a couple of seconds worth. Then the light blinked out once more. Shortly thereafter, two jet fighters came zooming into the area where the light had been. They were coming fast, and when they got overhead, they began to circle. The jets went back and forth a few times, and then they flew back the way they had come. February 13th at 7:30, Nikita Sim stepped outside her home in Leamington in northeast England. In the sky was a circular object with a ring around the middle. It kind of resembled Saturn. There was what looked like smoke coming from the lower part. The unknown object was moving upwards. It was not leaving a smoke trail. The smoke was just right at the bottom of the craft as it moved up. She took a couple of photos of the thing and then rushed inside to tell her partner that there was something in the sky to look at. Well, the object had vanished before they got back outside. There had been no sound at the time either. February 25th in El Paso, Texas, in the evening, a witness saw a red sphere moving over the mountain to his west. This glowing round object was pulsing as it moved. It was visible for about 15 minutes before it turned and began moving back towards the horizon. And I see I'm running over my time here. If you do happen to see something in the sky that you can't explain, don't bother calling the government. They don't want to hear from you. Instead, send it to me. If you want, I'll put it in my next book. If you don't want me to mention your name, I'll assign you a different name. That way you'll know that your story is out there, but you won't be receiving any ridicule in case somebody thinks you're nuts. Uh, Something to keep in mind. If you see something and you keep it in the back of your mind and you never tell anybody and then you die, well, it's like it never happened. We all have our own unique little story of something that happened to us, but if we don't have it written down on paper, it never happened. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, heck, tell people you don't even know. They should be listening up. If you'd like to buy one of my books, you can find them at Amazon.com, or if you're in Laredo, they're at the Organic Man Coffee Trike. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things, and if you'd like, you can hum the music at the end.